Hello guys, in this video we'll build a newsfeed application clone using Rust. It's basically a full stack application that we are developing today with backend on Rust and frontend using Vue in Rust, which is a bit like React. We'll be using Redis today for distributed caching, News API for fetching the latest news, and Rocket in place of Axiom today just to have a different flavor of a dependency for web server, and cron job for repeatedly fetching our data, latest news data, and you will be using for front end. So let's get started. First of all, move to your project explorer, and as you guys can see today, I don't have any pre-built cargo project because we'll be building our project in a slightly different way today. Instead of multiple binaries for front end and back end, we'll have multiple packages or multiple projects today. So open your terminal and make sure you are in the root of the project, and here we'll just do cargo new frontend and cargo new backend to add two different cargo projects for frontend and backend. Now, first of all, in your frontend package, add an index.html where we'll just add the base template, doc type as HTML, and HTML tag where we'll add language as en, head, and we'll just add a title as news feed app, and then we'll just add an empty body. Then let's add our front-end dependencies. So move to the project, and inside the front-end package, move to cargo toml file. Here we'll add dependencies, and first of all we need you with version as latest and features as CSR, which is client-side rendering, and then we need websys and request with version as latest and features as JSON, and then we need serdave with version as latest, features as derive, and then we need serde JSON with latest version, and then we'll build our project. Once the dependencies are ready, move to the project explorer, and in the front-end package and src add a card.rs, cardlist.rs, and props.rs. So in the card.rs we'll add our component for rendering our news, cardlist.rs, which will be kind of a feed for list of news, and props, which will pass to card. First of all, let's add our props. So pub struct props and derive properties clone and partial equal, pub title as string, pub description as string, pub image URL as string, pub publish date as string, pub author as string, and pub URL to the article as string. These are all the props that we'll need today. Let's add card component now. So first of all, we'll add a struct card, pass the props, and we'll impl component for card because card is our component, and we'll implement the members. So message we'll just keep as it is, properties will pass props, and in create we'll just return self props context.props.clone, and then we'll implement the view. So let props image URL title published date, author, description, URL is equals to self dot props to fill the props. And once we have that, we'll add our HTML. So I'll just add HTML and show you guys, because no point wasting time on HTML and CSS. So here is our HTML for card with some styling, and then we add our image and we have a fixed width and height, again some styling, and then we have some HTML p tag and h4 to render our title, description, author name, and published date. You don't need to worry about this. I'll provide this piece of code in description, so you guys can also uh, just use it. And now once the card is clicked, we want user to be redirected to the article. So for that we will add a on click here, and we'll use it right here. So in the on click, we'll just say let URL clone callback from and move, and right here we will add the logic to render to redirect. So websys window unwrap location set href, pass the URL dot unwrap. So basically when user clicks on the card, we want user to be redirected to the particular uh, link of the article, and card will just display the news as in the news feed. So this is all that we need in our card. Now we'll add card list for the feed for list of news. So just like card, we'll add a struct for card list, and we'll pass news here as vector of props, and then we'll just say impl component for card list, and again provide the implementation for members, message as it is, props as it is, and in the create we'll later call some endpoint, but for now we will just add some dummy props, just so we can basically, once we are finished with writing this component, we can run our front end and check if our UI looks good. So let me add some props here. So I just add some props here, just a couple of props in the vector, and we have image, title, everything is dummy. Let's return so self news, and now let's add our view. So we'll just again add some HTML. So I just paused and add this HTML again. As I always mention, no point wasting time on HTML and CSS. I'll provide this in description. You guys can copy as well. This is just basic div where we have a news list, and whatever we get news that we have, like list of articles or news, we just go ahead and create card for each of them, and card is just a component that we add in the start, which is a basic card, and we pass basically one by one the news here, and it will basically create a news feed for us. So that's pretty much basic things that how it looks like. Now let's go ahead, and for the very first time we run our front end, and but before that I think let's add it in main. So we'll move to main.rs, and let's add our renderer here. We'll just add u renderer and card list new dot render. That's all that we need here to render our front end. Now let's go ahead and run this. So just open your terminal, and let's to make sure we are in the root, and then cd to front end, and then here we'll just do trunk serve to serve our front end. But before that, make sure you have trunk installed, otherwise you can just do cargo install trunk. So as you can see, it's up and running now. So here is the first look of our application. It's a news app, and we have cards, where we have picture, title. Now let's build our backend and provide some real information here. So back to our ID, let's close this terminal and move to the cargo terminal for backend. The front end job is done, and here we will add our dependencies that we need today. So first of all, we'll add Redis with latest version, Surday with version as latest and features as derive. Then we need Surday JSON and a rocket for our web server today instead of Axiom, features as JSON, and request to fetch news data. We'll also see an overview of news API in a minute. Request and Tokyo with version as latest and features as full. And then we need Tokyo cron scheduler for cron job, and a rocket course for course, and .env to read our API key from environment variables. So that's all the dependencies we need. Once our dependencies are ready, let's spin up Docker image for Redis. So we'll just use docker run command and expose it on port, which is default Redis port. So docker ps, and as you can see, our Redis is up and running. Now let's get an overview of news API before we move and start coding the backend. So open newsapi.org in your browser, and it should look something like this. It's completely free, and we can utilize its different endpoints, and it has a very rich response as well, as you guys can see here. So you can pass the query. So let's say query as Tesla, or query as sports, query as entertainment, query as any other keyword that you are interested in. And then you can also provide the from, sort parameters, and API key. And how do you get API key? Again, it's completely free. Just click get API key and fill your details here with a valid email address, and on submit it will show you your API key, which you can use to access all of these endpoints. It also has top headlines, which are again filtered by country, category. You can also try these endpoints. It's completely free. So we'll just use its everything slash, and the query will pass latest with the date, and sort by as published date and API key using my API key, but you can again request your own API key. So let's get back to our ID. So back to our ID, just close this terminal and move to the project explorer and add a .env in the root of your backend, where we'll add our API key. So API key, and here you can add the value for your API key. Once you add your API key, move to the project explorer, and inside the backend package in the src, add cache.rs to interact with Redis, job.rs, where we'll add our schedule to repeatedly fetch data from news API and populate our cache, and model.rs, where we'll add our model. So let's start with model.rs. First of all, pub struct article, pub title as option of string, pub description as string, pub author as option of string, or let's make this optional as well. You can judge this by checking the output of, or the response of news API in your Postman or in Simonia to detect if any parameter or any field contains null. Then make sure to add this as optional, and published 8 optional of string, and pub URL as option of string, and pub URL to image as option of string. And on top of this, we'll just add derive, serialize, deserialize, and debug. Then pub struct API response. Now response does contain a lot of fields, which I showed you in the overview, but we'll just use the main portion, which is articles or news, deserialize and debug, and pub articles vector of article. So this is all the model that we need today. Now let's add our cache. So in cache.rs we'll add a struct cache client Redis client and add the impl for this cache and pub fn new cache, let client is equals to client open, and here we'll just pass Redis on localhost, and since we are using the SDK, so port and everything is by default edit since we are running on default port. So now we'll just add store news pub fn store news and mutable self and news as vector of article, and this will just return Redis result. So let key and string, so we can build our key here because let's remove this because we'll be using just one single key from, let's say, latest news. Let mutable connection self dot client dot get connection dot unwrap. Let data is equals to, we'll just store serialized data in cache to string, and news once we have our string, we'll just set connection set with expiry. So let's say this data will be valid for 60 seconds or 600 seconds or 10 minutes, and pub fn get news and mutable self option of string. So we'll just add the same key and let mutable const self dot client get connection unwrap value as option of string get, and pass our key dot unwrap and return the value. So that is our get news. We have stored news. Now let's go ahead and add our job. So in job.rs, first of all, we'll add fetch news. Now you can add these in impl, but I'll just prefer adding this directly in the module. So article dot env, okay, let key and environment variable API key unwrap. Now let's add our URL. So this is how our URL looks like. We want everything with query as latest from the det and sorted by published, and then we have our API key set up. Now let's add a client request client new let response client dot get URL header. Make sure to pass this header, otherwise you will just get an error. User agent, because there is some rate limiting based on user agent, so you can just add any name. I'll just add news feed app and send await unwrap and JSON value await and unwrap. Now since we have response, we can even print here, maybe just response, and we'll just say let API response is equals to API response JSON from value and response dot unwrap. Now we'll just add let news vector of article API response dot articles dot into iter dot take. So this payload could be as large as, let's say, 100 news, but let's say I'm just picking the top 20 map and article. So let's add our article and collect. So we'll just add article, and here we'll just add all the missing fields. So title as article.title, article.description, article.author, article.published, article.url, and article.url to image. Now at the end we'll just return our news, because we are returning, as you guys can see, a vector of article, and that's exactly a vector of article. Now let's add the job part. So async fn run, and we'll add a scheduler from Tokyo cron scheduler, new await unwrap, and let job new repeated async. Actually there are lots of built-in functions that you can utilize, like one shot job or repeated and with notifications. So make sure to explore this package, and if you have any questions, as always, just feel free to leave in the comments. I'll be very happy to help. So let's say we are adding here to load after every let's say 30 seconds or 1 minute, 10 minutes, whatever you want, but I'll just, let's say, add 30 seconds and UID, and now let's add the body for our job and unwrap. So let's say box pin async and let news. We'll just try to fetch news from the fetch function that we just added, and we'll await for the response. Once we have article, we can just print got news and news dot iter count, or just search for count, and it should be always 20, because we are just taking 20. And then we can just say let mutable cache new, since it's distributed cache, not in memory, so it doesn't matter how many or from where we create the instance, everything uses the same cache. So cache dot store news, and we pass the news. That's literally all for our job body. Now let's scheduler dot add our job dot await dot unwrap, and finally scheduler dot start and dot await dot unwrap. That's all that we need in the scheduler to fetch the data. This is all that we need in our fetch news. Now let's finally add our man.rs. First of all, let's add a handler for news API. So async fn news handler and pass cache and state mutex cache, and this state comes from Rocket. And in result, we can just say result of some string or status. And let mutable store cache dot lock unwrap match store dot get news, and if it's none, then we return an error stating status as not found, and if there is some response, then we just return OK of response. This is all that we need in the handler. Now let's add man result unit rocket error, and let's make this rocket man, and Tokyo spawn, and async to run our job await. So this is just to run our scheduler in a separate thread, and let cache mutex new and cache new, then we'll add course options default and allowed origins. So right now I'll just allow all the origin, but we can restrict to our front-end origin only. And rocket build manage cache mount the path, so routes, and use handler, which is right here, so you can copy as well from here, and actually move all the way to the handler, and let's add this as a route get and news. Now all the way down, and we'll attach course dot to course unwrap attach ad hoc config and rocket config dot configure and rocket config to add a path for the port. So port as, let's say, 4000, rocket config default, everything else as default, and we'll just launch the rocket, await, unwrap, and OK off unit. That's pretty much all that we need in our backend. So let's, for the very first time, just run our backend. So just open your terminal and make sure again to go to backend package, and we'll just do cargo run quite, and there you go, our server is up and running. As you can see, rocket is launched, and there is our data as well. We are getting 20 records. So now let's go ahead and call this endpoint from frontend, and so move to frontend cargo terminal, and here we'll just add a WebAssembly dependency. So WebAssembly and dependency. Once the dependency is added, we'll move to card list. So in the src, move to card list. So first of all, let's close all other tabs so it's more clear, and we'll move to backend model.rs, copy this article model, go to frontend props.rs, and we'll add right here, we can add clone, and in the card list we will just change the card list a bit. Instead of vector of news props, now we'll add article and link as scope and card list. Then we'll just add a message enum and fetch ready, then result of vector of article or request error and fetch. Then in our card list impl, we'll just pass the message here, and let's remove this dummy stuff that we have and call our backend for real news data. So right here we will just add let link ctx, let's add ctx back link and clone link dot send message. We'll just send message as fetch. When the component is rendered, we want to fetch the data. So news as empty vector and link. Then we will implement one more member, which is update, and right here we'll just add match message, and if the message is fetch, then we will go ahead and fetch the data. So link self dot link dot clone and spawn local async move and let client new, let response is equals to client dot get http localhost port 4000 slash news send await unwrap and JSON vector article await, and moving on we'll just do link dot send message that it's fetch ready with some response. Then once we get fetch ready in the response, what we'll do is we'll check if it's a fetch ready response. Then we just do if let okay articles. If we have a okay response, then we'll just do self dot news is equals to articles. We'll just set right here in our component and return true from here inside actually. And then once we have our articles passed along to the view, now view has self.news, which is all the articles that we get, but since it's optional, so we just do unwrap image URL or URL to image, unwrap or default published 8 unwrap default sam unwrap or default and unwrap or default. That's pretty much all that we need to do to build this newsfeed application. Now let's go ahead and for the very first time test our application end to end. So open your terminal and we'll spin up our backend. Cargo run quiet. There you go, the backend is up and running. Open another terminal window and cd to frontend and trunk serve. Frontend is running, backend is also up and running. Now let's open any web browser and test. So here is the first look of our application, news app. In our browser, as you can see, as we scroll, we have all the news with proper title, description, author, published date, and if we click any of those news, as you can see, it opens a news source in the browser, and we can go back to our own website. Let's say I want to go to this one or a different source. So we have all the news here. That's it for this video, guys.